All right, welcome everybody on Zoom to part one of a two-part series, AI in the Defender's Office. This CLE is called that because originally we were going to keep this in-house, and our presenter today is public defender alum. So when we looked at the agenda, we really said this is something that maybe the whole bar could benefit from. So our director, Steve Vittori, asked that I reach out to the bar and see if we could host this as a CLE. I'm the vice president of the bar, so I didn't have to reach out very far, but our administrative staff made that happen over the last couple of days. So we do think that there's going to be a benefit to all practitioners with some of this information. Our guest speaker will explain to us how AI works, where the pitfalls lie, how to engage with it most effectively. I'm sure some of us are using it. There have been some negative consequences. Sometimes it does tend to act like the most confident, but rambunctious law clerk you've ever had and generate some questionable material. So hopefully by the end of this, we will all be able to use it a little bit better. I'm going to have our guest speakers, high school mock trial coach Steve Vittori, introduce Karlo.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. Carlos, could you just stand up and maybe you're hiding behind it?
Yes,
This is Karlo Dizon. You know, Carlo's great. He's a product of the Guam public school system. He actually went to Yale undergrad, Stanford Law School, and even the London School of Economics to be complete. He went into private practice. Fortunately, we were able to get him for at least a year. And now he's working in New York. And I appreciate everyone attending. This was very last minute. It was very opportunistic, as you know, as public defenders are. He just happened to be on Guam for a few days and volunteered to do a presentation on AI. He has presented AI to I think the New York State Board of Governors, for their executive committee. So, you know, he does have experience, and he's also developing some very interesting AI-based legal websites that he's currently started. I don't know if any of you caught, it was a media blitz yesterday. And so without further ado, we'll present Karlo Dizon. Thank you, Karlo.
thanks, Steve. So hi, everyone. I'm gonna stand for a little bit. So as Steve said, I worked with Steve here at the Public Defender's Office, where I really sort of built a foundation in practicing criminal defense. I also, learned from Steve from high school. And currently at the New York State Bar Association, I'm part of the Committee on AI and Emerging Technologies under President Taya Grace, who's the current incoming president for the New York State Bar Association. And Steve and I are also working on the website territoryreview.org, which is, a database, an AI searchable database of Guam's law that just went live recently. So I think today we'll start off sort of foundationally and then intersperse demos and the idea along the way. And then the general idea is for you to get acquainted with, all the language surrounding AI, and then hopefully give you some tips into how you can
Hello, the judge is here.
efficiently use
Everyone
AI.
bow.
We're sorry. They're all on their whole line.
Sorry. How to efficiently use AI in your practice.
Hey,
Definitely live.
this attorney at law? The attorney at law? Everything's via Zoom these days, huh?
We need to admit more people, so.
Yeah, we also have the Honorable Johnny Gogo, a judge
Sitting next to the Honorable Stephen
in Santa Clara County, right?
the first chamorro public defender in history.
Whatever. But anyways, he also helped us coach
My trial team,
Dizon.
Karlo Dizon, to the championship
and
round.
so he just happened to be on Guam at the same time, and maybe he'll give a perspective on how the court, views the use of AI by attorneys, if he wants to interject.
I'm gonna I have to be very careful with comments about that, but I'll do what I can. But I'm here to see you, my friend. That's why I'm here.
Thanks, you.
Okay?
All right, so we're mostly here I'll be mostly speaking from behind the desktop, but also I hope you can see the screen, here it is, hold on, give me a second. So I think what I wanted to start with was this idea that AI is already a present tense professional practice issue here in Guam. So ADM 25-001 was signed on April 30th, 2025 and became effective on May 1st, 2025. So it wasn't just some sort of memo, it's an adopted judiciary of Guam policy that addresses attorneys, judges, court personnel, litigants, and other users of AI judicial work. And by April 2026, Guam's also already published Superior Court sanctions that have applied the familiar concepts of competence, diligence, misconduct, and filing certification duties for AI or onto AI assisted work. So generally, the upshot of OCOG is that Guam permits AI use, the OCOG and the policy, is that Guam permits AI use, but the responsibility for the resulting work never leaves the lawyer. So, the Guam policy, and you can pull this up, and I can also provide these as memos, as supplementary materials for afterwards. The policy is that AI should not be discouraged, but the use of it requires thorough review before AI generated material is submitted in a judicial proceeding. In BOCOG, as some of you might be aware of that case, the court found that use of AI without human verification led to some falsified assertions, or rather hallucinated assertions, and imposed a $1,500 sanction. The court referred to the responsibility of the human professional who uses the tool. It stated that the lawyer remains accountable for what's filed, regardless of how the first draft was produced. There was some statement by the attorney there as to, supporting staff who might have used generative tools to support the drafts. But the court found that, while those additional team members may contribute to a draft, none of them displays the council's obligation to ensure that the final work is accurate and authorized. So what that means ultimately is that, as with every work that we produce, the ultimate responsibility for diligence and fidelity to your assertions and the cases and so on remains with the lawyer. So again, the court, the rules been direct, right? This is a direct statement in the policy in the ADM 25-001. All users are required to conduct thorough reviews of AI generated content prior to its submission and any judicial proceeding. You can look at OCOG as an example of what inadequate verification looks like. The court identified at least 13 errors in that case. 5 false claims. It's the hallucinations included things like inaccurate statutory citations, inaccurate case citations, false quotations, misattributions, and even a fictitious case. The court found that opposition was prepared without using generative. The court found that opposition was prepared using generative AI and was filed without adequate human verification. And as a result, the lack of a proper review process was what led to the defective authorities in that filing. I think one thing, yes.
Can we go ahead and allow the people that are waiting to get in?
Yeah, I think we should do it in the waiting room.
Yeah, just a bit all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And I think one thing that I wanted to, two things that I wanted to express were that first, this isn't unique to Guam. So just a couple of months ago, there was a case in New York as well, where law firm Sullivan and Cromwell, which is one of the top 3 white shoe law firms in New York, filed a brief in the Southern District in a bankruptcy court in the Southern District, filed a brief that had hallucinations, and this is a firm that, you know, charges upwards of $1,000 or more per hour. They have armies of associates combing through the materials. So, the issue is not just technological, it's sort of institutional and has to do with practice and management. Secondly, you know, when you look at HOCOG, you know, don't think of it as sort of a universal application, but rather a fact-specific enforcement decision. So it's not like a universal penalty schedule. And, you know, perhaps as a speaking out of turn, of course, you know, but rather, you know, think of that $1,500 fine as, you know, sort of just like one data point rather than some big determination as to where the court is heading in terms of sanctions and enforcement, of these matters. I think this is where I sort of like take a pulse of the room and then ask you guys, where are you guys at in terms of your AI use? You know, have you used it generally for AI, for legal work, or you've tried it, but you don't have a repeated workflow, or you use one and want stronger safeguards? Where are you guys generally at?
It's being used. We have Copilot with Westlaw. Some of the attorneys engage with it pretty frequently. Some not at all, and haven't used the chatbot at all, or, you know, or Googling stuff, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I used it on appeals where I would just upload all the cases and the briefs and then ask it to pretend they're the Supreme Court and what questions they would ask. And I thought it was very, very useful. Hopefully, I don't remember it making up too much stuff, but because I gave it all the data that I was hoping they would rely on.
Oh, great. Okay. Judge Karlo.
So thank you, Stephen and Tori, for inviting me to sit in this morning. I'm actually on vacation, but in California, we are seeing the same issues that I read about in the Guam Pacific Daily News and in the case I think that Karlo was talking about. Again, AI is prevalent and being used throughout, I think, every jurisdiction. And I can think of at least one high-profile case in California where one of the district attorney offices on an appellate brief used false citations, and they attributed it to AI, and the DA's office was sanctioned. That I don't know if it's going up on any further on appeal, but certainly the DA was embarrassed. I can't remember if it was Riverside County or San Bernardino County, but it was one of the larger counties in California. I'm not going to comment outside of that because this is an ongoing issue. But again, as Karlo indicated, folks are encouraged to use AI, but that doesn't remove the personal responsibility of making sure that what you write in your motions and briefs is accurate and not misleading.
Yeah, so I mean, so I think that's generally where, you know, where everyone stands is, they found, and thank you guys, they found that these tools sort of augment your current workflows, and each person has their own sort of, is in their own journey in terms of how this is being embedded into their workflows.
New York in the executive committee, it was pretty much the same thing. Some, maybe 40% of the room had, you know, sort of heard of GPT and used it personally, but never thought about applying it to their work. And then maybe about 20% would use it, and then maybe about 30%, 40%, you know, use it regularly, but really didn't have sort of a general policy in terms of how they should engage. Okay, so I think that's where we are in terms of the landscape. I think next I wanted to jump quickly into, you know, you know, what we actually mean when we talk about.
So basically, I wanted to kind of just briefly discuss this. Essentially, when people think about Sorry, let me just. Thank you. Okay, so when people think of LLMs, it's often unclear how, a lot of people might use it, but it's kind of unclear what is actually happening under the hood when people use these tools and ask it to generate their output, right? And typically, there's different layers to it, right? So there's the actual app that you're using, like ChatGPT or Gemini app on your phone. And then there's the model underneath that's sort of gestating. And then there's another layer further down that's sort of, all the foundational calibration that the company, whether it's Anthropic or OpenAI, sort of undertook to get the model where it was. But the way it works and the reason why people say that it's a predictive model, that it's an inference model rather than like a, sort of like a precise, one that precisely finds information for you, is that it's all probabilistic. So for example, here, if it sees a sentence, if it's constructing the sentence, right, and it's, trying to predict what comes next, if it's going to render the sentence for you, the word that it provides at the end of the sentence is what is most probabilistic given the information that it has and given the prompt that you've given it. And here, if it knows that it's, if you're, the context is it's a non-moving party or if it's a moving party, and then, the evidence is reviewed in the light most favorable to the government or the party or the other party. So that's, this is all sort of how it generates that, right? So it has no actual knowledge of, the system of rules, but rather it looks at the volume of information that it has and it thinks about the probability that the next word is the one that's most likely to appear in that corpus of that second. Sorry, I just realized that I didn't share the screen. So this is what I was showing the room here. These are like probabilistically ranked words based on the corpus, and then the LLM decides what word to show next. Again, it gets into kind of like philosophical conversations over what knowledge is. But here, if someone gives you a sentence, what jumps into your mind? A lot, there's a certain percentage of people who would think of the word Matt, right? Though it kind of works in the same way, right? So the LLM sort of works in the same way. It's pattern based. It's not something based on an external source, but rather sort of like a survey of that internal information. So what does that all mean in terms of the work, right? That means that a couple of things. Give me a quick second here. Yeah, so that means I'd like you to think of LLMs as, or your approach to them as having two axes, right? One is fluency and the other is grounding. So fluency, you could think of it as how the output looks, right? So how readable the output is, how it's organized, the professional surface form. So is it giving you the product as a finished PDF? Or is it, something like raw text? And the other axis is grounding, which is how accurate is it to an underlying basis of text? Is the output traceable to an inspectable source that supports what the output says? And just as an aside, this is what differentiates our project, with Steve on the territorial review. Every proposition is traceable to an inspectable source, right? If you're given an answer, you can go directly to the opinion. Whereas if GPT, if you ask it a question on, Brady rights or the Brady Amendment or whatever, it wouldn't point you to the actual opinion. You wouldn't be able to look at it, right? So it's sort of a black box and you can't really verify internally within GPT. So every time, and the way to think about this then is, those are two things that you should analyze every time you're using a tool. Two axes. Sorry. Okay, so there's one important case, Mata versus Bianca, and in the New York presentation, this is where a lot of conversation centered around. And this is essentially a case where the court identified six non-existent decisions that the party cited. It wasn't like a typographical error, but rather those authorities were submitted in the form of a legal position. And there was subsequent filings as well. There were subsequent filings as well after those initial propositions. It produced a $5,000 joint and several penalty. And the critical thing was that the council actually ran a GPT verification check asking GPT to check if all the citations were real. But it still passed that second check. And that's because internally, GPT thought that the cases were real. And so if you ask it to verify that again, it would, tell you that it's real, right? Which shows that it's not sufficient to actually, ask the tool to do a verification. You would have to have a manual check or a more automated way to do that. There are several things that actually also increase the need for checking and verification. One is that it's actually explored how jurisdictions like Guam are more susceptible to hallucinations than other jurisdictions because we have less of a digital footprint. And so if you think of these chatbots as like a giant box with all of the world's digital information inside, and then you're asking it to probabilistically answer questions based on the amount of information that it has. The amount of information from Guam is like a super limited small amount there. And so it's more likely to hallucinate information on those facts or hallucinate information specific to Guam. And so one thing to consider is, how local or thin the corpus is, how recent the opinion is, the exactness of citations or quotations or numbers or names, any high stakes matters, so like things that you're filing in the court, client advice, witness use, and so on. Essentially, these are four categories, I would say, requirement independent verification. And because we are, everything we do here is, under our corpus, it behooves us to have more of that burden. And there's more here on what it actually means to have to engage in special caution versus sort of more cursory glance at a material. And I would say that generally speaking, the process, as you're all probably confident in, we could probably surmise, would be to use the tool to generate and then locate the materials yourself and then verify it based on the actual materials. And one thing that I was sort of playing with is this idea of almost like a proportionality thing where the riskier the product is, the more hours you should bill in the verification process. And this applies more to private attorneys, but I think a lot of the hours will actually shift to verification more so than natural generation. Okay, so this is where I sort of break and do a demonstration. So any questions before I continue? For you guys? Okay, cool. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull up, sample, a sample window here with Claude. And one thing that I would say that is a pretty hard and fast rule is if you're a private attorney, and you are using one of these tools, you should use an enterprise version of the tool because, you know, these accounts have zero retention policies typically. And you can actually, you know, look at your contract with the provider to, you know, it would be this, a similar kind of mechanism as would govern, you know, your Google Drive accounts or SharePoint or whatever you might be using for work, and why those are shielded from, you know, disclosure sort of implications. Whereas a typical ChatGPT personal account or, you know, Claude account wouldn't necessarily have that, and that could trigger, you know, disclosure of, or breaching your confidentiality obligations to your client. So for this demo, let me just,
With so Carlo, using like Westlaw's AI, that doesn't, they can't really say that. I mean,
No.
that's not work product, right? But
yeah,
if it's just general AI, there have been, they've actually been able to get work
yes.
product.
Yes, because it's, because personal platforms, they use your work to train your models. And courts have questioned whether that's disclosure to a third party by the client or as well. And this is based on, or by an attorney, rather. But there's a lot of things there, like the case, one of the cases that discussed that was, was whether a pro se client had an expectation of privacy over that work if it was, or so it was, what if it was about a pro se client? So it wasn't necessarily about an attorney, but the kind of, sort of caution applies for attorneys using these tools. But generally speaking, the premise is that you should use an enterprise tool because they have zero retention policies. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So, I think what I will do first is, have a sense of, so do you guys generally use Claude or, GPT for your work?
Yeah, probably neither for me.
Maybe Copilot or.
For Copilot, what is the extent of your use? What is the typical, project that you would use it for?
Maybe drafting email, but I do upload stuff into that, and the stuff I upload is like, when I'm done with it, right, it doesn't stay on their server, just.
So, I mean, I think I would say that for confidentiality purposes, you probably shouldn't upload my materials.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely not that.
Yeah, definitely not. So, and also, yeah, but for things like drafting emails, so, but again, all of this is sort of cured by having an enterprise, sort of fund. Okay, so I think what I'm gonna do with this, first demo is, so everything in this demo is fictional. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give Claude an incident report. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna give Claude an incident report. And I will share the incident report really quickly here. This is a fictional one that I created for this purpose. And I'm just kind of going to ask the kind of general assessment that people would request. And then I'll make the task narrower and require the answer to show the work. So, oh shoot. So, okay. Um, so how do you start? So, you can take your file and give it to the chatbot. And then, you would say something like, tell me what happened. Identify the strongest defense issue and give me a concise case assessment. And you can see that I have Opus 4.8 high set. If you're, using GPT or Claude, you can usually set the different models. Fable 5, you might have heard, is like this giant new model that Claude is hiding because the US government views it as a security issue. So, it's kind of like preview limitedly. But generally speaking, for legal work, I'd say stick to the most advanced models with advanced reasoning capabilities. And you can see, you could say, use extra, max, high thinking, whatever. Okay, and then you just click that button. So you'll see that sometimes gives you this step-by-step assessment. Or, if you actually click that, you can see how it's actually thinking. If you'd like to take a look. And this is what differentiates these newer models. They call them thinking models, because you can actually sort of like see the different steps they take to get to the answer. And also you can see why this takes longer. I would say this is why a lot of lawyers like Claude more than GPT, is that, it has these features, but also it's a little bit more deliberative about how it reaches its answer. So whenever a model gives you a really quick answer, a really quick response, generally you can sort of be more skeptical about the quality of that response. Okay, so we're not going to read through this pretty thoroughly, but as you can see, it gave us sort of it gave us this polished narrative, right? So now I kind of want to go from here to give you another example of what you can do with the same fact pattern, right? So let's say, okay, so now you have this. Now you can do something like, say, oh, was I, yeah, I was sharing this. Okay, now you can share something like this. Okay, I'll do it manually. Say work only from the, let's actually, say this, work only from the uploaded incident report. Do not use outside knowledge. Create a 3-column table. Position, status, direct observation. That paragraph. Look here. Do not decide ownership, send. So let's say we, do that. Then you'll see that will take a little bit longer, but one thing I would say is, there's a lot of things about prompt engineering. But the biggest thing I think that, about prompt engineering and how to write good prompts is really just to be precise about what you want. Think about every word as having that specific, precise meaning of that word, and then expect that the model will think about it literally. But that said, and I've said this before, these models are increasingly more intelligent and cheaper per token to render their outputs. And so, more importantly, they're increasingly more personalized towards your judgment. And so, the more you use it, the less precise you can be, and it would still sort of capture your attention. But I would say to get the best results, just be precise. Okay, so so you'll see now that as we earlier asked, there's a paragraph locator. There's no ownership, consent, identification, or substance identity indicated beyond the report. And then it's indicates what sources are still needed. As we asked. So I would say, the first is probably useful to give you a more bird's eye view of the main issues and, what you should be thinking about. And you could take any one of these, potential issues and, further ask it, to expound on that. The second is a little bit more precise about where you can find what information. Now you can think about how you scale this beyond just this one text file that I showed you initially to, PDFs, whatever. Any questions? Okay, cool. All right, so now let's jump back into the next. So I feel like I'm going way slower than I thought I would. But let me go to the next slide. So I'm gonna go through this quickly just because I think I was supposed to show you this earlier, but I kind of just skipped through it. I would say, just think about generative AI. When you think about what generative AI is versus machine learning and artificial intelligence, they're sort of like concentric circles. AI is way broader, so there's all sorts of people now, for example, like in physical AI, which is like mapping the physical universe and all of that. So, as lawyers, we're most concerned with generative AI. There's also, be familiar with these different products, right? The biggest ones are GPT, Claude, Gemini, Copilot. Harvey's also pretty big, but increasingly you'll find that these tools are building into them the capability to connect to other tools. So, for example, Claude and GPT can now connect to Westlaw via these things called MCPs, where basically you can go inside Claude, say, use MCP to connect to my Westlaw account. It pops up a link that then takes you to Westlaw, which you can authorize. And then you can say within Claude, use Westlaw through MCP to check whether, to check this brief for, whether any of the cases are hallucinated, and it will check it for you. And the benefit of doing that through that process is that you're asking Claude to retrieve information from Westlaw rather than from its own internal database. And, part of what Westlaw has is its entire, sort of history of key sites and all of that, that determine whether a case has been superseded or, amended, statute has been amended and so on, that you can't easily get elsewhere. So, that may be the benefit of retaining those subscriptions, by having these other tools.
So that MCP is Westlaw allows it, or is it?
Yeah,
You have
so it's up to each service, but as of now, I believe, so I know this for a fact that Westlaw has opened up their MCP and Lexis also has.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because for them, it keeps you, subscribed to their service, because you can only,
Yeah.
Okay, okay, so there's a lot more. I mean, I'm gonna give you guys all of these files, I'll share them with you later. But I would say some helpful just, terminology to know. Is so, prompt is, that thing that we sort of typed up on the chat, in the chat bot. Context window is everything that the model can consider at once. So you often see, Gemini being advertised as having a 1 million token window. And GPT has 256K tokens. That just means like how much can it remember in your chat conversation before it forgets where you are. So, if you were using GPT like 2 or 3 years ago, you might remember that like after like 20 minutes of chatting with it, completely forgot what you were talking about, and you would have to remind it, so that's what the context window is. The token is just a unit of text processed and predicted. Training data is like what was used to learn patterns. So for these tools, they're like the giant corpus of online information. Whereas for us, for territorial review, it was like, the corpus of one law. Hallucination would be, unsupported or false generated content. And fine tuning is additional training for narrow tasks. So you might have heard of Harvey, and I think they're kind of like this $200 million company now that specific to law, and they're taking on Westlaw and Lexis. But they're sort of an AI first platform that's specifically trained on legal information. And that just means something like, if you were a lawyer, you want to use an AI that understands what superseded means in the legal context, right? And, if you're thinking about these chatbots as probabilistic, that word means other things in other contexts. So if a model is fine-tuned for law, then it would have that specific meaning because it's in law that's used for that specific meaning. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So here, so actually we have like somehow 15 minutes left. Wait, no, we have 45 minutes. Okay, so I think the next thing is, so here are some additional notes on what it actually means to, let's dig a little bit more into the process we had earlier in the demo. This is, these 4 steps are sort of generally things that are good to keep in mind, and they're not necessarily, things that you should remember, but over the course of using it frequently, you would just kind of learn that these are efficient ways to get what you need accomplished. So the first is, and the first is, typically, this is something more relevant to earlier models, but it's also still relevant today, which is role. What perspective should the tool adopt? So you can actually prompt your GPT or your model to say, or your chatbot to say something like, with something like, you're a defense attorney appearing before the Superior Court of Guam, blah, 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 right? Because then it sort of immediately puts this hat on and acts accordingly. The context, as you can see from the demo earlier, we ask it to limit its use to to the specific files that we uploaded earlier. And you'll actually, and I want to jump back to that a little bit. Oh, sorry, I think this whole time I was just, I wasn't, sharing the screen. But so, yeah, so we're here now, but I want to jump back a little bit to our Claude screen. And, so you'll see that each conversation, you can think of it as, sort of like, one stream of thought you might have about that matter. But then your whole matter can also contain its own memory, right? So you can attach all the files relevant to that matter, all your PDFs, all your case law that you research and so on, any specific instructions you might have, right? You can instruct it to only look at long law, for example, and then the memory is something that would summarize. So basically, you can have a matter specific project, and then these sort of pervade across all chats, so you wouldn't have to necessarily, upload it each time. And then let's say you had that, and then you had all of those in memory, and then this incident report is just something that you sort of came across independently, and you want to ask something specific to that. Then it would take, your project files into account as an underlying basis, and then, this text file as a more specific basis. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. Okay, so, so that's where we were with the context, the task and format, it always helps to give it a sense of what the work product is, of what it should return. And if you're kind of just ideating with it, you don't really need to do that. And then the check, what must be verified, quoted, or left unresolved. I think it generally helps if you ask it what it's unsure about, so that you can do that yourself. Or you can ask it to look at more specific sources. So for example, if it tells you, these 3 cases need to be verified, you could ask it to give you, try to look online for those cases and give you the links, so that you can actually just, click the links yourself and then look at it yourself, rather than leaving it sort of as an open loop. And you'll see here, the context changes the work product. You can ask for, very, precise prompts versus a sort of general and weak prompt. Think of the audience, think of governing constraints, think of what to do with unknown information. So you can say something like, if you're not sure, indicate so explicitly. You also, I think one thing is that, if you have facts that you want it to indicate, to sort of take into account explicitly, it helps to include them as a file. Let's say you have a witness interview, and then your thoughts about that interview. You have the witness interview transcript uploaded as a file, but it might help to also write out your own thoughts, even in free flow, as a separate text file or as a Word doc, and then upload that as a foundational document, so that that's taken into account across all your chats, right? Again, these are several ways that the workflows could break down, right? So the task could be vague, there's not enough materials. The source, there could be a blur in terms of what's actually in the record, or versus what the language model has produced itself. And then, again, having no review gate is a workflow breakdown. The review gate, is critical, but I would say that, it's important to just think of it as a habit, and that you can sort of build on over time. Again, the typical process could be you load something like a synthetic report or a transcript. You ask it for specific questions, from that file. You ask it to, give you a specific paragraph citation, for example, or a marker to a specific paragraph. And then you inspect every citation, and then you revise and export accordingly. Okay, so I think now we'll break for another demo. But before I do that, are there any questions? No?
I don't think from us.
Okay.
What, do those guys online, they can just unmute and ask, right?
Oh, yeah, so I guess if anyone has questions, please feel free to let me know, online. Okay, so no questions yet. Yeah, please feel free to raise your hands if you have questions. Okay, so for this next demo, what I will do is, so give me a second here. Okay, so I think, this next demo could be something that is helpful, for example, something like discovery, right? So let me just, so let's go back to our Claude window. Let's go back to the case. Okay, so for this one, what I would do is, so now let's say for this one, I have the 7 text files. And you'll see that one is a composite body cam transcript. It's a dispatch log, witness follow-up interview, a lab report, jail call, excerpt, let's say a discovery index, and officer incident report. And again, it doesn't really matter. Generally speaking, these things can read any text file or Word doc or PDF. So, you should, yeah, you can.
Yeah, how's it go from like handwritten statements by witnesses? You have to convert those to PDF
I
first,
think-
or?
Yeah,
Text.
so I would say, no, you can actually just even take photos of them. But I would say, the best way would be to scan them, as PDFs. And then, then you can upload as PDFs.
But even if they're handwritten?
Yeah, it can understand handwriting.
Not mine.
Yeah, I mean, not my handwriting. Okay, so I think, so let's say you have that. And then, what I wanna do is, and I'm gonna have to type this, I was supposed to just paste it, but say these are static materials for this exercise, and I'm just saying that, just to be clear, use only uploaded files. There, discovering the human threats with one row of columns, issues, sources, supported. With follow up. Number required Two. And then. Text. So. Subtraction. Superlative. Section. Superlative. Fidelity. And follow up. Classes. Oh boy. So, and I'll provide all of these, afterwards if you guys are interested, so you can get closer. So, and we can just, this might be interesting to see how it's actually thinking about it. So one of the things to think about is, you kind of want it to give you surfaces to investigate rather than having it decide legal significance. So I think that's kind of one space where, one way to think about the work that it's doing. Okay, so now it gives you this discovery matrix. That's hopefully. So it has a possible issue, the sources that support it, sources that contradict or qualify it, exaggregators, missing source or follow-up, and so on. Now let's say I want to do something like, I need to present this in a key. Create patient that I'm going to check on. Have one slide per hospital. This part I'm kind of having, doing this kind of as a improv, so we'll see. The cool thing about, like, I would say it's just over the past year where these tools have been able to incorporate skills, and that's like a technical term. It comes built in with like PowerPoint skills, HTML design skills and so on. And it can actually render those for you pretty well. And I would say, as of 6 months ago, to 8 months ago, Claude was pretty ahead of GPT with creating these slides, deliverables like slides, PDFs, Word docs, and so on. But GPT's caught up pretty quickly. You can see also like the kind of work that it's doing.
While it's doing that, I just wondered, sometimes it says like, give it more time or something like that. Have you seen that? Is that a chat GPT thing or,
What do you mean?
to give it more time to think deeper or something?
Yeah,
Is that, what does that mean?
so I think, some models that don't have thinking turned on. It cuts off after a certain period so that you don't, it's sort of, you can have it, uh, continue developing its response internally. But I think a lot of the newer models, it's sort of, you have, thinking turned on already, like here.
Oh,
So that you can just set it once, and then it kind of just keeps going until it renders that. I'd have to check with GPT, but generally speaking, you could, sort of. Any other questions?
Carlo, is it gonna physically open PowerPoint and make a presentation, or is it gonna give you material that you could plug into it?
Yeah, no, it's gonna give you an actual PowerPoint. Yeah, so, well, I'm hoping that's what happens, but that's, so, I mean, just to give you a sense of like where things are, I mean, how I personally use Claude, I'm sort of, oh, okay, here, great. So let's actually download the file. Yeah, so you can see on the screen, it's actually like pretty awesome. So here, let's share the PowerPoint.
so while you're doing it in practical terms, like if you're in trial and then at the end of the day, you get the trial disc, and then you somehow convert that to transcribe it, then you upload it to that, and it can make a slideshow of all the inconsistent.
Yeah, it can. So here, I think should be showing on the screen, right? So here, like, it just gave us this. Oh, yeah, okay, so we don't have, so you'll see that it's an actual PowerPoint file, but we don't have, I think, the account signed in for the PowerPoint here, so we can't like actually,
Oh, really?
yeah. But yeah, you'll see that, see, like, I saved it as, I saved it here, so it's here, right? So, just to show you the workflow, like, we're originally in this folder or in this view,
Also,
right?
it won't open up in PowerPoint.
Yeah, but it has the PowerPoint here, but you could just like download it and then, see that it's an actual like, it's an actual file, right, that you can download. But just for the review purposes, we'll see what the slide looks like, here, within Claude. So material issues for team review, how to read each slide. Ownership of that, and these are each of the issues that we had earlier in the skipping, whatever, the table. It says review, you'll see how it says review required, in each top right corner. Yeah, so it's pretty cool, right? And now you can think of ways to do other things, right? So, for example, let's say you're managing a team, and, as Steve was asking, like, let's say, you want to have a summary of what happened after each day, right? You can ask them to just create PowerPoints for you, have it like, and then you can like sort of just, gather all the information you need there. But then you can even ask it to further iterate on that. So let's say, this isn't detailed enough. I need more context for each slide to onboard new team members who are not. You know, basically, like you could just sort of keep iterating on, you know, the slides, and then it will take that existing slide that you saw earlier. And you know, iterate from there. And the cool thing is, all of that stuff is going to be saved in your, should be saved in your artifacts. Well, yes, it will be saved, it should be saved here. Here. Oh yeah, here, so you can click this button and it would show you all the content that it's made for you so far, like the discovery matrix, so on. Okay, so that's, I think it might take a while to, do you want me to like keep going with this demo or do you want to the next one?
Why don't you go on to the next one, Carlo? I think, I mean, the point is you can refine stuff, you can ask it for more detail, and now it's gonna generate something much more complex.
Exactly. Okay, so from there, let's continue. Okay, so I think next let's look at okay, give me a quick second. Okay, so I think from here, I want to sort of jump to something that's specific to the defender's office. So how we would be able to use it. So let's share this screen. Okay, and I think the biggest thing that the sort of biggest takeaway, I would say, and again, all of this could be further developed, in subsequent, iterations of this, discussion, would be to, look at this as something you can use to address volume, not to substitute for judgment. So I think that's the biggest thing that we are sort of like, grappling with as public defenders is that, it's, we have more volume than arguably any other kind of lawyer. And so that's what you should point that arrow towards. Okay, so there's this one, there was this one study that was done, and I'll include this in supplementary materials. It's an article, and they actually surveyed 16 interviewees to get a sense of how AI could help them. And, almost all of them indicated that it's really in these volume specific tasks where they found it most useful. So transcriptions, generating summaries, identifying key points of recordings, deduplicating, legal research and writing and so on, court representation, how to, dealing with clients, ideating the strategies and so on. So this was, I think they interviewed 5 state public defenders, 5 federal public defenders, and 6 former defenders who were serving as law professors, and 1 federal investigator. They all said that they were eager to use AI to help make sense of discovery data. I'll provide that study afterwards. The next thing to think about is, it sort of can help you narrow, your perspective, sort of like hone in your perspective rather than thinking about it as excluding certain evidence necessarily. Think of the original body of evidence as still fully integrated, but you're just like casting a spotlight on certain areas of it, right? Using your tool. You can use AI to, churn through hours of audio and video. Yeah, anytime you use you can use it to transcribe things, but anytime you think about transcription, you should think about it as sort of a first pass navigational aid. That you should always, check, on as key to material times, to specific timestamps. You also, should think about how mistakes can compound. So if you have the primary source evidence, let's say, documents or whatever, or let's say an audio, interview, and the transcription has an error and you don't catch it, then, you feed that into your LLM and then you ask your LLM to, churn information from there. And then, disseminate materials to your teammates and so on, and then use all of that. I mean, at some point, it becomes hard to trace where the error was. So, transcription at the end of the day is always going to be, it's always going to need, first person assessment. But you can think of it as like, helping cure the very first pass. That's typically the most, time consuming. There are certain things that, also could, sort of trip up transcripts. So accents, cross talking, so multiple people speaking at once, speaker attribution, right? Like who's saying what? It's, typically difficult to gauge. The channel, so like, what device are you using? And then the conditions, so like, are you recording in a room versus like, an open space with a lot of other people around? So all of these can sort of determine the accuracy of the transcripts. Let's say you have, 100,000 file production, which is not something that we probably would do here, but, it's something that you, might, encounter at some point. It's, the way to think about it is to sort of, find ways to triage through this giant corpus, through various efforts. So you can do a first pass to deduplicate, right? And then, before you exclude something entirely, you can manually verify any duplicates that it's identified and then toss those out. You can cluster by certain things like events, issues, and so on. So basically the idea is you want to minimize that corpus, as quickly as possible under your given time constraints, given, the unrealistic size of that corpus. And then, how you can use the machine to keep honing that down and sort of peeling away layers of the onion. Okay. Again, I think the value of using the tool rises with the volume. So I think, again, it's, probably certainly on island, I think the public defender's office could benefit from AI the most. And I think, there are, I think 4 areas where we could look at further ways to incorporate AI and how, and each of these could be their own, sort of multi-page report and, multi-person team, research effort. But, just as a sort of a big sort of bird's eye view. First would be transcription and search. For this, what are you guys currently using to search through matters?
I mean, in this office, we have the Westlaw, but people may be using, free chat GPT to look through
Well,
certain.
for like your case materials.
Oh, well, I mean, they're linked to our case management system, but a lot of times we use like Windows
But
Explorer.
for case management, for your case management system, can you search across files? Has it implemented AI yet?
No,
Okay, so that's one, I mean, there are AI tools now that are specified to that,
so like if we had an enterprise one that we could link all our,
your CMS too.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
So we have to look into that.
yeah, so then you could, search and then it would help,
Because right now, say there's an officer that, a judge report, it just got dismissed because of some, illegal material that came out.
Yeah.
So we can't easily like search our entire database of cases
Yeah.
involving the same police officer, but
yeah,
if we had an AI engine, we think we would be able to do that.
yeah, it can. And the difference between now and before was before you had tools that could search by the name, right? But it misses the context. But now you could just say, let's say, the name of the officer was John Smith, right? It would capture if it was just J. Smith or John F. Smith, or if there are multiple John Smiths, the John Smith at the Agate precinct, right? So all of that context is taken into account when let's say you ask it to, or when let's say one of the projects is to profile key players, right? That allows for that kind of analysis that wasn't really present before, so it's a more robust, tool. But again, there are AI specific tools for CMSs for large volume firms, and offices. So yeah, timelines and summaries. I think this is useful if you're thinking about, let's say, you have a client where the docket is like a nightmare and, there's like 100 different filings and it's difficult and it's confusing to figure out what happened when. So that's something that could be useful, because you could just enter the entire client's docket, for example, into, your project, folder, in Claude, right? Like that files area I showed you earlier. Yeah, so like a very common way to do this, and this is what I do for my own practice, would be to, and again, you should use enterprise models for your work. And, just to give you a sense, for my own practice, I have multiple users and like one user. So I have an organization, an enterprise account, but I have one user specific to legal practice, for my actual matters, and then another one for like presentations and stuff. Yeah, so you can upload an entire, let's say, you have multiple projects, right? And let's say one project is a matter. You can imagine putting your entire client's docket files into this, and then have it make sense of the timeline where it could otherwise be confusing. Drafting and client text. So, fact review, heavy editing. One thing that I found is, clients really appreciate it when you sort of can remember things about their case, or cite, or, sort of indicate that like, oh, when you met Mary on the 21st, what did you talk about? And that's something like that could be sort of hard to remember on the spot. But if you already have your project matter, you could just easily start a new chat saying, hey, I'm about to meet with Mary, what were the key dates that I should remember so I can bring it up for our meeting, and then they kind of just appreciate that. Just things that could help you with, some fact intensive things. And then research, and filed work. Again, a lot of, and this is something that we've discussed earlier, but when you're drafting your memos, your briefs and so on. And you'll notice that a lot of the issues that we've discussed or that the courts have looked at have always been in this sort of bucket. This, this filings bucket, but there's, three other huge buckets that the courts will never really see where AI is still very useful, right? And, so really it's almost like you can use AI everywhere until the very end where you have to file something with the court. And then at that point, you should at the very minimum, read your brief and look up your cases. It's sort of at the end of the day, that's kind of like the takeaway. But again, many areas where AI can be deployed. And the market is moving to a point now where basically, it's getting to be so rife with, and it's getting to be filled with, tons of startups that are focusing on all of these verticals. So you have, to the point where, at some point I was thinking about what kind of startups to deploy to public defenders. It's not even, it's already too saturated a market to create a public defender focused AI startup. The one niche I could identify that hasn't been occupied by a startup somewhere is a habeas tracker. So basically something specific to like habeas filings. So that's how specific it's getting, right? So basically, and that's generally where the market is heading to, because these tools are so huge now. What you'll see is that there are going to be very specific tools that all at the foundation of it call to like GPT or Claude to do the thinking, but then the tools themselves are more specific applications that you can use for your practice. Okay, so again, volume versus judgment, right? So searching or organizing large records, transcription and so on, very helpful. But don't think about it as something that ever could eliminate things like strategy, advice, advocacy, all of this stuff. And I've found that a lot of lawyers appreciate it anyway because these are the things. The second bucket contains the things that you kind of enjoy, but also meaning and judgment. That things like how the phone calls you've had with your client. How your clients reacted to certain conversations, a random text message you received in the middle of the night. I mean, AI is never going to capture all of these things. So when it opines on an approach, so when you say, hey, I'm talking to Mary tomorrow, give me notes, it can't really capture all of that, right? Because it's never going to capture all of those interactions. And so, these kind of like softer variables that are still very important, especially the client-facing side of the practice, you can't really substitute AI use for. Until we get to a point where, we just record everything that we do and ask AI to do it for us. Which is a joke. Okay, so that's and I think we're running low on time here. So I think I'll just go through really quickly. I would say at the very baseline, what each firm needs is to have a certain policy, like an explicit policy or handbook or manual that actually lays out what your verification mechanism is, and then what your approved systems are, right? So I think once you lay those out, then everything can sort of build from there. I would, and there's multiple layers here that I sort of play, right? Because I'm doing the CLE, but I also practice, but I also sort of have like a public advocacy component where I'm telling people that if they're talking to their lawyers, they should ask their lawyers what AI they're using. And sometimes that their lawyers should disclose those in their contracts. And maybe you should build into your representation agreements, whether you prefer that they use AI or not, right? So, I mean, all of these things are going to come into play. But I would say that for defensibility purposes, if you're ever sanctioned, at least one way to protect your team or the office would be to have these manuals. They're not gonna completely inoculate you, but at the minimum, it's something to point to and be able to argue, court. Again, this thing that, I mentioned something earlier about like a proportionality risk assessment, where the greater the risk, the more time you should spend verifying. So the question is, how do you analyze the risk? I would say, think about it as, how close does it get to the decision maker? Whether that's a judge or the client or an opposing party, if you're sort of in private practice. Well, I guess opposing party's not a decision maker, but let's say you're, anyway, the more checks that you should have, the closer it gets to the decision maker. Okay. All right. I would say that when you having one of the things that you should have in the policy when you eventually implement that is sort of like a framework by which the biggest thing is traceability, right? And transparency. So let's say your attorney files a briefing, what the underlying information was that the attorney used. So let's say the attorney seeded the chatbot with which specific PDFs, what the system settings are. So what chat tool it used, what the thinking model was, whether it was his own account or the enterprise account, whether it was its own independent chat or a chat within a matter. And then, which lawyer filed the briefing. Because I think that allows you to then sort of calibrate what you need to fix to prevent those things from happening again going forward. Because it's not just, some tools are more likely to hallucinate than others, but you might find that, certain matters that have like PDFs that have the numbers on the side of the screen, right? Like that indicate the lines of the paragraphs are likely to hallucinate more because your matter is like number intensive with damages calculations or whatever, and that's like throwing off the machine, right? So it's like really just taking account of each step. And again, all of this is sort of should be part of how we should be building the framework for AI adoption in the practice.
So you find like state bars are implementing one for the bar wide, or are they leaving it up to each firm to develop their own?
I would say, the New York bar hasn't issued anything. Even New York, so one of my co-presenters was this woman who she was a former New York bar president. She actually left practice to just fully focus on working with firms on how to adopt AI. So even if you do adopt it, these frameworks, you could end up with a completely patchwork, landscape where everyone does their own thing. I don't see. So I don't know where the bar association are heading, but I think internally it just makes you more efficient as a firm, regardless of what framework you adopt, and having a framework is better than having no framework. So, okay, and then finally,
Yeah, because Guam, most of Guam's are solo practitioners, so it's kind of like it's unless there's like a model policy, are you aware?
Yeah, so. That's a good question, for the bar to take up with the court. And, I would also say, I don't know how the courts are deciding how to calibrate the sanctions amounts, right?
Mm.
But if I was judging like a solo practitioner who was like, oh, I use GPT to do this, versus a solo practitioner who said like, oh, I actually have this framework that I share with all my clients, and this is the system I used, and But, it's sort of like the fact that the hallucination is tied to some form of negligence. And how zealous are you, I guess, in your representation? All of that can be part of that determination, right? So I'm not saying that like having that, sort of inoculates you, but again, I guess it could help. But in terms of what the bar should do, I certainly think it could be useful to have a baseline. But at the end of the day, it's gonna be up to the attorneys because, the bar is just never gonna prescribe a specific app, right? So,
But in all fairness, there've been a lot of court decisions that have been amended because of reliance by the court on AI as well, right? It's not just the lawyers on the party side, right, that have been
yeah,
dinged for it. Although I don't think judges get dinged for it, they just file amended opinions.
yeah, and I mean, I think I'm less. I would say that I can imagine they're under more pressure because everyone can see their work, whereas no one really sees your work except for them. And also they have to check your work, whereas no one's checking their work. So I think they're under their own set of pressures, So yeah, I think everyone across the board. So for private practice, I think, how to bill is a big issue, right? Because you previously would have billed 40 hours for memo and now it took you like 2 hours to create it. Like, how much are you gonna bill that for? So that's a whole thing that they're trying to figure out. Okay, so I think we're at the time. So,
Carl, can I do a question?
yes,
So, many of our cases don't have so many police reports, it may be 15 or 20 pages. But in processing a lot of discovery, a massive discovery file, first, what would you recommend as far as a program? I mean, I can't just drag and drop a terabyte of information into Claude, or can I? And second, I think the idea of identify and exclude duplicates, could be incredibly helpful. But what other tips along that line do you have as far as processing a huge amount of discovery?
yeah, so I can, this is a whole separate thing. I would say the first thing is there are specific tools for that because discovery specific tools have existed long before generative AI. It's just that it's sort of supercharged the whole thing. And it's made it, and I think it's made it more, not necessarily cheaper, but it's just allowed more tools to just adopt AI as the engine. But the second thing is, how to use these tools to do that. This is a little bit more advanced, but so right now, right, you have Claude as the interface, right? But you'll often see people referring to like the web client, right? Because Claude itself is like the AI. And I personally don't even use the web app. I use it through terminal, right? Which is like the command line interface that looks like the matrix and you're just like doing code. Because what it does is all the files are stored in my laptop, right? Like I could have a folder with 10 gigs of photos. And then I can ask Claude via the terminal to like analyze those photos. And
So they don't really upload it, they just look through your.
exactly. So everything is on device, right? And so that's another way to do that. And honestly, if you're dealing with a big discovery file, that's how I would do it. Okay.
But then we need an enterprise account, right?
Yeah, I think that's the baseline. But for that, it sounds daunting, but honestly, it's just the command line interface looks daunting, but you talk to it like you would talk to Claude. So it's not like you're reading or typing code. You're literally just typing everyday words.
Yes, and I don't know if anyone out there has any questions, but anyone have questions out
Yes, if
there?
anyone has questions, please raise your hands.
But I do want you to talk a few minutes about that territorial law.
Oh, yeah, so.
Because I think that's a neat tool for people.
Yeah, so territorial review is, a website that I developed with Steve and our teammates Tessa Borja, who also used to be at the PD, and also BJ Cruz, as here in our profiles. But what it is a project where we built an AI searchable database containing only Guam law. We have all 792 opinions in the entire Guam code annotated here. And how it works is basically, so let's say, let's say you want to know about the gas block. So you know how I said earlier, these GPT or Claude is kind of like a box with the entirety of every digital information ever stored online. This is a box that only has Guam law stored in it. So when you ask it for stuff, it only gives you the things that it finds within the law, within the corpus. Let's say it gives you this answer, right? And nothing is ever going to be bulletproof, and that's what I guess what I want the takeaway to be is that neither this or GPT will ever give you the most foolproof answer. But the cool thing about it is that it performs 3 checks. One is, is this a real case? Is the case in our corpus? And is this a case according to proposition that it states? And then the second thing is it's actually linked to the material. So let's say here, people be John, right? You can actually click to the opinion, and then it pulls up the opinion. And then after going through the opinion, you can even dig further deeper. Like, let's say this paragraph, there's a lot here, and I personally also sometimes glaze over reading opinions because there's just too much there. So you could just say ask. You can click on this ask feature after each paragraph and say, ask it to explain the thing in plain English. And then it gives you an answer based only on the content from the opinion itself. And summarizes it for you, right? And then you can keep asking more questions about that paragraph. So yeah, that's we've also done things like, so you can look at the Guam code annotated specifically. You can also, and this is a feature that's more political, but we also like keyed specific public laws to specific senators that they passed, and then you link it, and then you link it to the code or the actual code or like the public hearing on YouTube connected to that. Right. Well, I'll have to double check that one. But again, this is a public resource, so any issues that you might have, message us and we will let you know. But I know that someone in Steve's team is already using it, so you can use it for work or whatever purpose. And I would say, yeah, that's it. Anything else?
Yes, nothing more, Carlo. Just when you're finished, I guess I'll sign off.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. So thanks, everybody. Hopefully everybody's giving their best silent adult drug court clap to Carlo right now. A couple of things on this CLE. We had very limited time. This is in the announcement, but this has not yet been approved by the CLE committee. We'll get that paperwork submitted, and I'm pretty confident that they will approve this, particularly given how good it was. If you just wanted to watch this because you were interested, it was free. If you want to claim CLE credit for it, you need to go onto the Guam bar and register for it, and then there will be a fee of $25 per credit, which I think is probably the best CLE deal in town, really. But that is the upshot here. That window to register for this is going to be open for some time. I would prefer that everybody does it as soon as possible, just so you don't forget and then try to ask us to open the window again. But it will be open for through next month, until the end of next month. So you have a little bit of time to do it, but if you want to claim the credit, please do it soon. I think that's it. Thanks everybody for attending, and we will update when we have a part 2 of this ready for prime time. Thank you.
Thank you.